would like to move on to the next speaker for the day. He is a senior consultant and a member of the Board of Study at Postgraduate Institute of Management, University of Sri Lanka. So as a design engineer by profession, he has nearly 25 years of executive and senior management experience in the private sector as an engineer, project manager, business development manager, and general manager. He earned an MBA from the Postgraduate Institute of Management, University of Sri Lanka, and a PhD in Business Administration for his doctoral thesis on commitment in high-performing Sri Lankan companies in the area of organizational behavior. He was also instrumental in setting up PIM's business incubator Genesis and is currently its mentor. He also served as the coordinator of PIM's development projects under its disaster management program in 2005. He has served on numerous panels of judges of local and international awards. His professional and academic reputation has been built through the specialist activities in training programs internationally, in addition to his research. Hence, he would be the ideal person to speak on getting the canvas laid out. In other words, getting the business idea right. Therefore, please join me in welcoming our next speaker, Dr. Tavis Perera. Over to you, Dr. Perera.
Hello, good morning. Thank you, Gani. Thank you, Dr. Gani. And thank you very much for everyone inviting me to make this presentation. Am I heard? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
That's great. Okay. Very basically following up from Professor Saroj, who spoke very details about the scientific thing. I will be really talking more about how you would go towards the commercialization of any product or service that is being invented. So let me now share the screen with you, and then let's go ahead with that. Okay, is the screen seen? Is it clear? Can you see the screen? It's okay?
Yes.
Right. Right. So actually there is a following from the scientific approach of finding a problem and really trying to look for a solution and going into the mechanics of everything that really creates this problem. You need to take it in the world of commerce. That's the important thing. And what I'm going to show you in a few screens and also talk about that is really how to really take an idea through a process, a set of processes to get it into a commercial world. So I will be talking in general about these principles, but I would be specifically relating what I'm going to talk about in terms of something that was done, and that is basically the hydrogel-based footwear solution. Okay, so moving forward, this is where the is particularly relating to the problem of diabetic foot ulcers. And as you can see in the map shown on the right, there is a high frequency, high behavior regarding this, mostly in Asia, more than anywhere else. So there is a big problem here. And it is actually most common causes actually are worldwide, but in Asia, it's very high. There are various types of solutions to this, including insoles, various types of insoles that have been designed for the use of diabetic foot ulcer patients. But the whole problem here is, in addition to the problem of the disease itself, is that there is no scientific or engineering validation regarding this solution. So this is where really this solution was developed, and what was proposed was a hydrogel-based footwear solution to prevent ulceration and also how to manage it. There is no established market using hydrogel there, so it's very specific and it's a new thing. So I must tell you, having from the scientific studies on this condition, uh, we move into the commercialization. And the commercialization, while the scientific is focusing on invention, commercialization focus on what we call innovation. So there are a couple of slides I want to show you here, which actually show the principles of typically taking a product like this to the market. And that's very important because upfront, even before the investigations, scientific investigations are done, it's very important to see the feasibility because uh, main thing is that you need not spend a lot of investment really on something that might not be wanted. So it's based on various human behaviors, and we talk about these behaviors in three levels: needs, wants, and desires, basically. So when we talk about needs, it's very basic, like hunger, for example, health, their needs. Whether you're rich or poor, you have these same needs. But as your conditions or your disposable incomes rise, these needs become wants. In other words, when you're hungry, you will say, I'm hungry, that's a need, but I to go to a particular restaurant. So then that's very specific. And of course, the word desire is something that is lifelong sometimes and originates maybe in childhood or so. But if you let's look at some of these important things. So really, what really happens is we are looking at human life in this case, and we have to design. Designing is very important thing to a unique value proposition. That is the whole idea of taking a invention really into innovation. You need to have a unique value because there are so many products that might solve this issue, and really we need to actually penetrate into these markets with this product as well, and that will give the sustainability of any organization. There are three levels of sustainability in an organization. That is the typical first level is, well, you're producing something and you have key performance indicators and you have profit. That's the first level. The second level is actually talking about outcomes, where the people who are doing it, for example, the scientists or maybe the innovators, need to get a return on their effort. So that's important. And then you have also funders who want a return on their effort. Then also the people who are actually experiencing the benefits of a product like this is that they would see value. So we look at value as a very important thing, and we need to develop whatever we develop. It needs to have a unique value proposition. The word unique value proposition. Value proposition really means something of value that you propose towards a condition, mostly a human condition, which may be a need or a want. So there are so many writers who have spoken about it, and Steve Blank actually is a person who came out with this term unique value proposition. It says a single clear message that you're giving uh, people why you are different, and also worth buying, of course. That's the important thing. So what I'm showing here is how you decide on a unique value proposition. And this diagram that you can see is really what's called a value proposition canvas. Now, most of our studies actually are now based on canvases, and they replace a lot of documentation because they are visual, one thing, and also what's inside there could be hyperlinked into other documents if necessary. So it's always very important to work with the modern technologies we have, where we can we can really connect up to other sites as well as that using this. So now if you look at this diagram, it gives you an idea where to start off to create a unique value proposition. So in general, we are looking at a situation where we were talking about. And if you look at the right side of this canvas, you have the beneficiary or the people who are experiencing, who will experience this value. So what do they want really? What do they really want? They may arise from, we are talking in terms of the solution that we were talking about, is really from these patients who have issues, diabetic patients mainly, and they want very basically a quality of life, right? They have so many things to do. They may be professionals, they may be housewives, they may be anyone, but there are so many things they have to do, and this is impeding their work. So therefore, they need some kind of a thing. And when we talk about value, this is important to talk about again what value is. There are two aspects to it. One is what we call the utility value or the functional value. It must work. It must work. It must be maintainable. It must be robust, and it must also not fail. Very important. That's the functional value. The other aspect is the emotional value. Very often, the emotional values are things that give emotions. You're happy with it, and you want to return back to it. You will say something about it. You will comment about it, and those are the feelings that you get, which is also value. So two aspects. One is the functional value when you design something, which is very important, and most of the functional value is based on scientific principles. But if you look at the emotional value, you will want to know how you would design to that. Very basically, it's by using our sensors. You have to sense it, and also the patients also have to sense it. You know, we have five sensors. Very basically, visual. It must look good, right? Auditory. People must comment on it. You can hear people commenting on it and saying it's good, right? And kinesthetic. It must feel good as well when you wear it. So we talk about this particular aspect of the diabetic thing. And very basically, they also, the other two aspects of course are not relevant sometimes. That is the olfactory, the smell, and the other one is the gustative, the taste. Of course, if it's food items, food and beverage items, those things will matter. But quite apart from that, this is one of the key aspects when you're trying to design to value proposition. It's very important to have the functional, right? That comes first. That's the function. But the form is also very important, and that's the thing that gives the emotion. So having decided on the needs and wants of any product that you're going to develop, we look at two other aspects where people are concerned, the users or the beneficiaries. We need to say, okay, what are the gains? What are the benefits they gain by this? In other words, they can walk faster, or they might actually not feel any pain. They'll be able, they won't have stress and things like that. So that is the gains. So we need to identify those gains because when we design something, we need to look at these aspects. Then also we need to have a good idea about the problems experienced by these patients. That is the pains part. This is very often by pure observation and experience with patients like this. As a result of that, we have a good idea about value towards these aspects. So it's quite when you're in a very competitive world, when you might design something, you might actually invent something, but whether it will be a proper innovation taking to the market is very important, seen like that. So on the other hand, we look at really what we call the value map. We first spoke about the customer's profile map, and that's very important. Now there again, you might look at segments if you really want to pitch in properly based on demographics like age and maybe other issues as well. So it might be very specific. So you might have models as a result of that. You might have certain models. Then, and also we say price. Price may be another very important dimension at what price people could wait. Because sometimes there may be more patients at the bottom end of the income pyramid, so they can't afford a better thing, So therefore, you might design mostly sometimes to the bottom end of the pyramid a different price, but at the top there would be people who want superior products doing the same function. So therefore, you might actually design another model which for that. So this gives you the whole idea if you really understand the customer profile map. Then how do you actually link to this map? That's shown on the left, what's called the value map. And focusing on the problems, we have to design for pain relievers, the kind of relief, not only relief, but also sometimes prevention of certain things and cure based on quality, certain quality aspects, which only the customer or the beneficiary will really experience. So we need to do that. It's not only building to standards, that's important, and that's scientific, but we also have to build to emotions and things like that when we are focusing on this. Then we talk about gain creators. Now these people who can't do certain things, like for example walking, uh, we have to design for that. We have to design then who is this person. Is he a working person, or is he a person who actually has to walk miles on a road? So as a result of that, these features are added as gain creators, focusing on the gains. So this entire thing is embodied in products and services. So it's very difficult to distinguish. There's a very small margin between what we call a product or a service. Product, of course, is very often very tangible. It has dimension, physical dimensions and things like that. But ultimately what it really does is the service. So we have to understand what it is and embody these ideas that we got from the value proposition canvas into the product. Now I must tell you this, it's good to identify this upfront even before the invention, because then it's very important. So therefore very often these products are developed by cross-functional teams at the beginning itself. Not only the scientists may be this, but at the beginning itself, you create a team of cross-functional people who will bring it so that you don't go a long way right up to the prototype and you miss out some of these very important things. So it's always a design like this is preferable to be done in a cross-functional team right from the beginning. So that's really what we talk about a value proposition canvas. But once you want to get something into a market and it becomes a business, so to speak, there is something else we need to look at, and that is really uh, how we describe through what we call the business model. And I am really focusing on the hydrogen insert here to be more specific. This business model canvas is a really it's a canvas. The purpose of a canvas, as I mentioned earlier, is that any of these things, once you depict it, it could be projected. People in a team can look at it together, and you don't go sequentially from one function to the other. You see the entire system in one, and that's what's important. So when someone comments on one area, another person could comment on the other area. So 9 blocks, this is sometimes called the 9 block model itself. It was actually brought to the market by Alexander Osterwalder, so it's sometimes called the Osterwalder business model as well. So what it talks about basically areas that are there in a system that develops a product and takes it to the market. And you have everything here. For example, you have the production side, and you have the finance side all, and everything flows into what we call this unique value proposition. So where do we start? Actually, it's on the right side. You have this analysis of these diabetic patients, and As I mentioned earlier, you need to start with a target segment, ideally, because there may be ultimately so many models of this item. And the target segment I would recommend is first to select a set of early adapters who are waiting for this product. Actually, people who are really keen, because what happens is you need to initially not go to the big market. You need to go to a small segment who will give you a good feedback. That's very important. And maybe you target a group who actually you have a lot of connections with, who you can get it, because the product is not fully developed at the beginning. And very often these early adapters will help you develop the product further. So it depends a lot of things like that. And once you perfect the product, of course, you go to the larger market. And also investment is less when you do that, and it might be good. So the location, where what is the income level? Because these are the very important things. You can't. Any designer doesn't really design a product and then say cost plus. Basically, this is my cost, this is my profit, therefore this is the selling price. That is not the equation for a designer. The designer's equation starts with what can they afford, what is the price, and then from the price you subtract your profit, you add your profit, really, you subtract your profit, and then you have the design cost. So you have to design to the cost, you have to design to the cost, right? Good examples of this, if I would say, quite apart from the medical field, is the design of the Tata Nano. Really, what really happened here was it was Ratan Tata really who sensed the need in the market, because once when he was driving on the roads in Mumbai, a couple of family of four was really moving on a two-wheeler. It was a rainy day, they skidded and fell, nothing happened to them. But then immediately he sensed the need in the market, and he said there must be something better for a family of four to travel. So it has to be something rather than a two-wheeler, but it should be a car with thing that can actually have shelter and things like that. And then he went and challenged his designers to design a car for 100,000 Indian rupees at that time. So really, whatever people said, no, you can't do that. You can't design a car like that because the traditional cars have different things. So really, the designers were challenged. They came out with the design, which actually minimized is a more kind of ellipsoidal shape, less material. Even the hubs have only three nuts, and they removed all the accessories. There is no chassis. There is a subframe which is equally strong, and they sold it. The first nano that came out was 100,000 Indian rupees. So really speaking, you have to design. Then the product actually hits the market, really. So that's very important that you don't do cost plus, but rather you do profit minus, and then price minus profit, and then that's your designer cost. Eventually, that may be the first segment, but definitely, if you're looking at the hydrogel insert, it may be not only for patients, it could be also used for athletes and industrial users also, people who are working in factories and all the climbing things. And so that may be another segment, but maybe you go that as a second segment. Now, once you look at how do you get to these people, basically, is you need to build customer relationships. Now, we talk about the hydrogel insert. Customer relationship is actually through real sensing, really, because there are clinicians, there are hospitals who deal with these patients, and sometimes get into a hospital, there would be intermediaries like distributors and retailers and people like that. So they will know a lot, and actually the connection to the customer or the patient in this case is really built through what we call customer relationships. So it has to be there at the beginning to find out information about needs and wants and things like that. But eventually you need to have relationship continuously with the customer through customer intimacy. You need to know who these people are. Once you design a product, you don't just leave out once it gets to a market. You have to continuously uh, go into new innovations, new versions, and things like that, because the customers themselves are changing and they themselves would like an added feature sometimes. So you need to keep to them. Otherwise, another competitor, because remember, when you get anything to the market, there are people who have similar products. So therefore, you need to be unique. Therefore, you have to continue. See the case of the mobile phone, how fast it changes, and there are so many competitors in the market. But they always added a new feature. They add a new feature and go ahead. So that is totally done through customer relationships, through the information you get of the changing needs of customers and also their own strategies. Customers also have strategies, and therefore how you would get it. So in the case, that's a very important block also that we need to identify. And eventually the physical, if it's a physical product, then you need to build channels to get the product. So it may be physical channels like clinics or whatever. Where is this point of sale? Or do you, as we are now experiencing in the COVID situation, the pandemic, that you would actually use another delivery channel like Uber or Pick Me or whatever, to really get this. So this also has to be checked out at the beginning. So you see, there are so many things that have to be done really to connect up, because once you design a thing, that's not the end of it. You need to actually keep going forward and make it into some establishment as well. Now, the left side of the model is actually the production side, where you look at who is doing this, for example, who is doing this. Now, in this case, you need to have an organization that does this. Maybe not the innovator, but maybe not the inventor, but maybe a commercial organization. Eventually, once you have designed the product, then you have to design the process that keeps continuously continuing. When the demand grows, you have to supply. So then you have the processors in organizations that keep producing this. That, in fact, is maybe the biggest investment, because it may be a factory or a kind of a production process. So the product development side is the basic thing. It goes up to the point of doing the prototype and the final product also. But once you have okay and you have checked it out with these early adapters, you might really come to a final product. And then you have to think of the productivity, because that is the cost side, very big. Basically, the cost side. When the demand grows, you have to actually manage the cost as well and the quality as well. So those are key activities which are very important to manufacture these, say for example, the hydrogel insert into a shoe or whatever thing like that. Then you think about the key resources. That's another block. Who are these people? Basically, when we talk about resources, resources are the things that help the conversion of inputs into outputs. They help the conversion. So it may be people, it may be who are these people actually who are. So if it's first development stage, the scientists and people like that who really make the prototype. Once it's production, it's a production people. Then the technology. Initially, it may be very basic technology, but as the demand grows, you might have to invest more on technology and also capital. Maybe in this case, we are talking about locations sometimes and institutes and things like that. Then the licenses and the IP, that's important. And then you can't do this alone. You may be having a particular competitive advantage, and but there may be others who might, for example, the suppliers themselves. When you are into a manufacturing business, manufacturing a product like this, the raw materials have to come along a supply chain. So there are so many things so many supply chains along the way. So they may be coming from the sides. Eventually, you go downstream. What we call downstream is really once you manufacture it, it has to go into the market. It will go through distributors, retailers, and finally the consumer who really uses it. So who are these partners? The researchers are also partners for this entire, we talk about the business model, the innovators and the designers themselves. So we need to identify that. Now, no business works without flow of cash and capital, basically. So another very important thing here is you need to optimize costs. So if you can do this in what we call lean systems, where actually there is no waste, and also green systems, where there is low carbon footprint and low water footprint and low low space footprints, really you actually can optimize your costs. You can see how many things are important to take a product to the market, really speaking. So you need to optimize that. And then you need to look at the next block. The ninth block is the revenue itself. The revenue, even if you are doing even if a non-profit organization makes it, there are cash flows. And therefore, that's very important to sustain the cash flows. And if it's a profit-making or profit maximizing organization, particularly doing a product like this business model becomes a social business model, which is slightly different, where you have social value also added along with this. So this is the typical business model that you will look at if you are thinking of a product which ultimately finally ends very successfully in a market. So what I was saying is that you might have a brilliant scientific innovation, but if you want to take it to the market, you will actually you will have to look at all these aspects upfront more than anything else. Otherwise, there may be a time wastage, and you have to make your time also very effective. Okay, I'm moving forward really into what we call. How do I remove this? Okay, fine. Really, we actually, the design thinking is very important. And although in the past, design thinking was linear and forward, very often we have to think back at every stage. We have to think back at every stage. So these are the stages of a design, basically. First, as I mentioned, empathizing. This is very important because this is the area of sensing the need. You can't just do a market survey and take a set of questionnaires or something like that to find out the problems or the issues that users are facing. You have to physically go there and sense it. Actually, even as a team or as a person, you need to sense it. Our five senses should capture this entire thing, including feeling, because the emotion part is very important to really make a superior product that goes into a market which actually sells. So that will help you to define the problem clearly. Once you do that, then you ideate. Now this ideation part is is in the mind. It's actually sometimes people's ideas that generate. There may be for one problem, there may be 100 ideas, right? Or 10 ideas. And that's very important. So ideation is usually done not by a single individual, because you might have a part of a solution. Another person might have another part of the solution. So you need to have more like a multifunctional team to ideate really what's happening. Otherwise, you might not be able to design the product totally to give total value. So therefore, this ideation part is important. Now, there are, according to what the famous writer Stephen Covey used to say, all things are created three times, according to him. One is in the mind. Someone gets an idea and maybe a set of ideas how to solve a problem. The next one is he will put it down on paper, either in the form of a drawing or a sketch or a flow chart or something like that. And then he will eventually go into the physical thing. So three things actually, anything is created in three stages, and that is what we call ideation. So once you do from the ideation, creating it physical is the prototype, and finally you test it. That's really the process that for design thinking. It's not linear because after every stage, there is reversible. You could go back and think again and move forward. In the case of diabetic footwear solution, this is important, and therefore, at any stage, you can't simply go forward. You have to, at every stage, rethink and see whether it's possible. Because once you, at some stage or the other, you will discover something that you have missed out, and maybe you have a better idea, and that would come in. So, in the case of our own, if you look at our conditions that someone might wear here, you can't just imagine it. You have to really physically experience it and see it and things like that. So, main thing is ultimately it must be an affordable solution uh, to reach the target group. Okay, really the design team continuously uses, talking about design team, that's very important. And I would say this is a multifunctional team. Uses their results to review, question, and improve their initial assumptions, whatever they had, and maybe they should be prepared to change these assumptions in the face of reality. So you move forward, and this is the next stage that we talk about is once you think about ultimately your product ending in a market, you have the world of commerce. Really speaking, there are other products. They may be not in the same form, so there are other products available in the market. And here is another important things, where are some ideas that come from what was known as the blue ocean strategy, to actually be unique. This will help you to be unique. What really happens is, really, if you look at this diagram on the left, this diagram actually is generally referred to as the strategy canvas. That's because you need to pitch your product against similar products and see differences and try to be quite unique by looking at this. So we have if you look at the horizontal axis, certain value dimensions regarding, we are talking in terms of the diabetic insole. There are certain value dimensions, and you need to know what these value dimensions. They come from the value proposition as well. One dimension is is it curative? Does it work? Does it work and cure? Is it durable? How long can you wear it? Is it preventive? It prevents injury or strain or whatever. Is it affordable? That's important. Is it climatized? Because people really walk in different conditions, and particularly if you're pitching to the bottom end of the pyramid, you have to understand that, say, for example, a vendor or someone like that who walks on the road, he has to experience rain and things like that, and mud maybe sometimes. Is it scientifically validated? That is very important. And also, does it look nice? That's important. You can't have a bulky thing, people will not want to wear it. And that's the thing that captures the eye. That's what I'm saying. Basically, it's the emotional or the sensorial thing that really prompts a person to make a purchase more than, of course, the functional value is important, but really what captures an eye, or even the information someone gets from someone else, is the auditory kind of information, really is very important. That's sensorial. So really speaking, if you look at some of the products which also focus on the same problem, we have just shown here product A, product B, and product C. And we are just measuring on the vertical axis just only levels of high, medium, and low, basically that kind of thing. So if you look at product, for example, the product B, sorry, the green product, which is product A, it's very high on curative. So you could actually map out, now how you map this out is again by perception, or if you have figures, that's fine, but perception is very relative kind of measure here. In a group, you might actually get a group and then get a response from a group of maybe users who would say, is it so much? Is high, medium, or low? Really, here is the blue product, elegance is really low. So yeah, when you are designing something, this kind of map will help you to determine what you want to do. One of four things, and that's shown on the right. What do you want to reduce? There may be something that is not that necessary, so you have to reduce it, or totally eliminate something. Now, if you reduce and eliminate, it focuses on your production cost. If you reduce and eliminate, but if you want to raise and create some new value, raise or create, then you are increasing by a value. People actually will value it more. So as I mentioned, value is functional as well as emotional. You could do both those things at the same time. The earlier assumption is if you increase value, then your costs go up. But this principle is what's called value innovation, is focusing on both uh, raising and creating value as well as reducing and eliminating costs on the production. So this is also something that's very important if you are looking at the design. Now, this is one of my last, just one before the last screen. The thing is that the world is not a simple world. It's very complex. As you go in with a product, you'll find that there is so much of it. Say, for example, even a beneficiary or a patient or even a consumer for that matter is not the same every day. Really speaking, we have as human beings, we are never satisfied, really speaking, with whatever we have. We want something more, and this is very important. Why do we want more? Because of the experience we have today. When we experience something today, we see around, and therefore it's like climbing the mountain. As you climb the mountain, you at the base you see very little, but as you go higher, you see a bigger horizon, and there is infinite. Our mind is infinite actually. So therefore, this is really what happens. So you have to keep forward. You have to persevere or pivot. Really speaking, once you start with an idea, this is actually called the build, measure, and learn idea. Build, measure, and learn idea. Learn loop, really speaking. And here what it really shows is that you have an idea. You have an idea first, and that idea may be very basic. Now look at the level that we have come very far on the diabetic insole. We can't see the other things. When we go into the market, immediately we do. So in order to get into the market, you build what we call a minimum viable product. A minimum viable product is just sufficient to satisfy the need, right? Because we can't project our mind beyond that. Once you put a minimum viable product, that solves the problem. But once you meet the when the users start using it, you will discover what is more to be added, and you have to be then measure. This is a very important part. You need to use the strategic canvas sometimes to see how much you have achieved, and then if the idea is good and it's still good, you will persevere. You will persevere means you keep the model improving. And say the example of the smartphone. Today it's still a smartphone. The main product that we have in a phone, mobile phone, is connectivity. That's the product, basically. That's the core product. Today the thing is embodied in a device which we are very familiar. But when time goes on and we start going into maybe colonizing planets and things like that, still the need for connectivity will go on. So it may not be connectivity may not be solved with a mobile phone. There will be some other device. That is because at one point it was necessary to pivot. It was necessary to pivot, keeping the core product of connectivity the same. We talk of the mobile phone. You have another device which, because of a new technology that has emerged, has. So we have to keep moving. On one side, the invention part has to keep moving and searching for new knowledge, And the innovation part has to actually embody this knowledge into a new product. So this is very important as we go forward. This is the path. This is actually the way forward, really speaking, to either persevere or pivot. So I need to end with this last screen, which is actually is very important. Today, all management is very scientific, and actually the basis of all management is that you have to measure something. If you measure something, you can manage it. So that's very important, and you need to validate every time you learn something. And that is why, if you look at a product, say, look at a company like Apple, for example, why is it there? Because why is it still existing? Is because it's distributed widely and they have established companies, but they still think like scientists and experiment. They research, they make new prototypes, they promote, and they keep refining and eventually launch, keep on launching. So it's an opportunity to learn. And that's where in my presentation,